Now, every Thursday, I review the Church Crime Watch before it gets published in our Facebook group. And this week, a story jumped off the page to me, and it reminded me of a couple of things. One, of SIPTED principles. And second, it reminded me many years ago, this could be 5, 6, 7 years ago, I did a security risk assessment of a sort of a merchant's yard that had copper, and the copper kept being stolen. I'm going to tell you, I'm going to relate that story to this in a moment. So let's dive in, because you're most probably wondering, Simon, what is it that you are talking about? Well, in my homeland in England, a very old church, well over 150 years, has had 6 burglaries. That's right, 6 burglaries in a 12-month period. And what are they stealing? They're stealing coffee, tea, milk, and biscuits. And you gotta, if you're watching on the YouTube, there's a picture here of the stained glass window, which is going to cost over £1,000, which is most probably sort of $1,300 to fix this window. So a big problem they're having with burglaries at this church, and it's all over low value theft. We're talking tea bags and biscuits. I'm displaying lovely biscuits on the screen here if you're watching on the YouTube channel. And here is what is very interesting about this, is the church has responded to all these burglaries that they've been a victim to. And they're starting to talk about, well, the burglaries are pushing the church close to the limits. And they're pushing this old Anglican church almost to the doors of closing. So I'm going to pause here and talk about how this relates to my client that I had many years ago. Now, they were a commercial yard. They had this copper, and the copper was being stolen. I was doing a security risk assessment. And I can remember one time, one of the executives was telling me about how much money kept being lost. It was something fantastic. We're talking hundreds upon hundreds of thousands of dollars each year. It could have even been close to $1 million. And he'd hired me to do a risk assessment, to look at it and say, well, Simon, how can we stop these thefts from occurring? And can you give us a risk assessment, look at the vulnerabilities and mitigation strategies? And I hadn't even broke the tip of my pen on my pad at the time when I looked him in the eye and said, before we start, I've got one question for you. And I said to him, why is the copper here in the first place? What do you use it for? And his answer shocked me. He said, well, we don't use it here. I said, well, what do you mean? He said, no, we've got another sort of merchant yard, which is out of state. It just comes here for transportation, and then it then goes there. We don't use it here. And I said, so you're having all these burglaries, hundreds of thousands of dollars. Your insurance is starting to say they might not honor the claims anymore. And you're coming to me. I said, can I just suggest that maybe it doesn't come here? Can it not go straight to the merchant's yard? And he paused for a moment. He looked at me and said, Simon, you're right. He said, how can I reward you? And I did nothing, but that's most probably the happiest I've ever had a client be, because we just removed the opportunity for a theft. Opportunity causes crime. So in this particular case, when the community has had 6 burglaries in 12 months, they're stealing low-level items. Clearly, these are people that are homeless. These are people that are hungry, and they're breaking into the church because they know there's tea and biscuits there. So when I read this story, it came back to this copper plant of 6, 7 years ago, whatever it was. And my answer was, if you know they are breaking into your church for food and low-level items, and you've got glass-stained windows, which are 150 years old, that they're breaking to get in, and it's costing you $1,000 to fix a pane of glass, that's $1,200 for my American audience, why do you need to have the food inside? Why can't you have the food outside? If you're watching on the YouTube channel, I found a couple of food pantries that we have here in Minneapolis, where I live. And the signs actually say on them, take what you need, bring what you can, be a blessing, and serve others. So I just found a couple of pictures of some food pantries. Now, this story is 7, 8 days old, but if I can find an email of the church, if no one else has suggested this yet, I'm going to send them a message and say, have you considered having a food pantry outside, because that is why they keep breaking into your church for low level items. So remove the opportunity, be a blessing to them, and then they won't break into your church anymore, because you're going to leave a food pantry outside where they can take whatever they want. So I want to jump in and just go through that story, because when I read it, it reminded me of this copper plant. It was having hundreds upon hundreds of $1,000s of theft each year, and they were looking for solutions to it. And I didn't even do anything to them other than to say to the executive, you're telling me it doesn't need to be here. So why is it here? And they stopped the thefts overnight by not having it at that location. So sometimes in security, we go looking for the big high ticket items, but sometimes it's just looking at the problem in a different way. And it reminds me of September when I was at Mall of America. There was a concrete walkway going over one of the highways. Terrible robberies were always taking place in there because it's a concrete walkway. You couldn't see anyone. And then the walkway was pulled down and replaced with a glass walkway, and it went over a road. And what that meant is every person that walked over that walkway was then seen from the road. And it eliminated robberies almost overnight. They went down from 1, 2, 3 a week to zero. Because why? Those criminals didn't want to be seen. Every time they walked through that walkway, there was a car underneath that would see what was going on. So sometimes in security, we don't have to go for the high ticket items. Sometimes it's just very plain and simple. But that story, there's a serious side to it, but it gave me a little dry smile when I read it. And I think I will try and reach out to the church and say, have you considered having a food pantry outside? Because rather than going straight to, we can't afford the glass stained windows, we're going to have to change for church. Perhaps sometimes in church security, we need to look at the problems in a different way and say, can we remove the opportunity? And then we can keep people safe and secure. So that is it for today. You stay safe and have a blessed day. But before I go, let me know your comments. Let me know your reflections of that story. Is it so obvious that someone didn't think just to put food outside the church, and that's why they're breaking in? Let me know in the comments below. So you stay safe, have a blessed day. Until next time, take care, everyone.